One of my favorite franchises of all time has to be Indiana Jones. As someone who loves not only history, but seeing great stories made out of them in historical fiction, as well as period pieces, it feels like Indiana Jones was made for me, which makes it sting all the more that the last good Indiana Jones product we got was like, what, the ride? The Lego game was pretty good. The last two movies were butt, and with a track record as bad as that, and being published by a studio with a track record as bad as that, with timed exclusivity to a console with a track record as bad as that, it's safe to say I was skeptical about this game. Especially since I haven't been the biggest fan of franchise games like RoboCop Rogue City. So is this game just another RoboCop? Let's see as we get into the spoiler review of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Everybody loves that original trilogy for good reason, and this game really wants to fit in with those movies, not only by fitting it between them on the timeline, but by literally putting in a movie. Not many franchises can make me reach for my Funko Pops and have a soy jack freak out over a mountain, but Indiana Jones is absolutely one of them. It is a cheap way to win brownie points from the player, shoving nostalgia in their face, but I feel like there's enjoyment to be found in an original story and a recreation. Like, I would genuinely love it if Machine Games just one-to-one recreated Temple of Doom as a video game, but I also want to see something new. So getting a new story while also getting a taste of the other option is a nice way to start the game off. I'm also glad that this is how they use the tutorial. Instead of starting a story that has a slow beginning because the player has to learn how to play the game, they let you take as much time as you want to learn the mechanics in a set piece that's familiar enough for you to be excited to go through it, but since there's no mystery being chased, you're not rushing to see what happens next. Starting the game off at the Jovitos Temple lets you understand the game without causing any issues with the pacing. They also include a major part of what made those movies great by making a score that feels like it was composed by John Williams himself. From sprinkling in that iconic melody every once in a while to stings during organic gameplay moments.
Just going for a swim.
This game parallels the fantastic score of those films. Like, watch how rad this sequence is. You want to know what's even cooler about this scene? It's not how it happened. I'm bringing back an old trick of mine. This is the real scene. At first, I thought it was because the game knew I was streaming it for footage and automatically turned off anything with copyright infringement, but no, I checked other people's playthroughs. This game lacks music in some seriously important moments. Whether it be action-packed scenes or ones that just revolve around character dynamics, there are great moments in this game that are just hamstrung by the exclusion of music. It's not bad enough to ruin these scenes, but it is a noticeable stain, especially with how good the music is when it actually shows up. But just like the music when it's there, this game does capture that feeling of Indiana Jones and stays true to the series. I love how real and clumsy the fight against Voss and Gantz is. Things go wrong, like when they fail the fire trial and have to escape instead of solving it. As weird as it sounds, I'm glad they kept in some hateful imagery to make it feel authentic instead of pulling a Kino der Toten. And the only time I thought the game went too far was when they crashed down the side of the mountain on the German ship. That was a slight yeah right moment, but not to the level of the fridge scene, and I do like how they escape, but the survivability of what happens leading up to that escape is questionable. But I've really grown to appreciate the first-person perspective. I was very skeptical at first. I thought it was the worst possible decision ever for this game, but it always knows when to switch to third. Playing in first gives you that immersion. You feel like Indy, you relate to him more. But switching to third person lets you see not only our protagonist in cutscenes, but the spectacle of swinging across an abyss or climbing around the side of a blimp. And one of the best parts of that immersion is so simple. Just seeing your shadow. Looking down at the ground and seeing the silhouette of your hat being cast from you puts you in Indy's shoes, while also hyping you up with this iconic character's presence in the same way the films did. It shouldn't be that much of a surprise to hear this game uses a first-person perspective though, when it's developed by the same guys who made the new Wolfenstein games. And they were a great choice. You see classic Machine Game systems in here from the Wolfenstein games. Like being in first person, leaning when you aim. That's all I know. That game was way too hard for me. I only got like 3 missions in. Regardless, Machine Games made a really fun game. There are a lot of unnecessary inputs, pressing square to grab a door and then moving the analog stick to open it. It seems super lame at first, like they're trying to gamify everything, but once it comes naturally, physically turning keys and dials yourself to open stone doors and tombs that have been untouched for centuries makes the experience way more immersive. It's such a little detail, but adds so much to the feeling that you are Indy that you wouldn't get if you just held square. And those puzzles you interact with are fantastic, like we got elephant-type puzzles, puzzles, finding the numbers for each of the wounds of Christ's crucifixion. One of my favorites is using mirrors to reflect light on the symbols that combine to form the locks in the middle, and I do think it's a really cool addition to split the puzzle and gameplay difficulties to get the whole experience if you like both, but if one aspect isn't your favorite or you're struggling with one and it kills the pacing, you can adjust it to how you like. One issue I do have with the puzzles and exploration though is that there's a bit of a disconnect between story and gameplay at times. Usually the game wants you to feel like this is your adventure. If Indy's discovering a secret tomb, you're the one that has to discover it. But there's a specific area called Wat Mahatat that leads to a big sequence in the story, and Gina says the entrance has to be hidden around here somewhere. So having played the game for 12 hours at this point, I put on my little disguise and scoured every inch of this temple for like 15 minutes, only for me to walk back and hear Gina say, I think there's a hidden entrance right here. The solution was just to sit there and wait. And that's not a problem this game has often, but it sticks out like a sore thumb when it can't live up to its own great quality. But like I said, they bring in another staple from the movies and put in disguises, which I do really like, but it's kind of annoying when you want to wear the classic outfit, but it's more convenient to blend in, and it doesn't really get explained too well, like how captains can see through your disguise, but only some of them. In the Vatican, I got caught in the clerical suit a couple of times, but never in the black shirt disguise. Matter of fact, there's a good amount of stuff they don't teach you. Would have loved to know how to dodge before I entered an underground fighting ring, and I had no clue you could flip guns and use them as melee weapons. It sucks especially because they're great systems. Using old bolt-action rifles is really fun and a nice little hurdle in gameplay that adds more strategy, and I love the hand-to-hand combat to the point I barely ever use the guns. The stamina bar makes it easier for you to get overwhelmed, meaning you can't just fight your way out of every situation, but timing the parries and knowing when to dodge or throw a punch is super fun in a simple way. My only issue with them is that you fist fight giants and there's literally no difference. They're just more likely to grab you and take more hits. They use them as boss fights, but there aren't really any boss fights in this game at all. There's the giants which you fist fight, the blind giant you fist fight but can use light and the coins on the ground to your advantage, and Voss. Gee, I wonder. The only exception is the giant snake in the hidden pyramid, which is built up really well, but I wish Lucas killed it without any boss fight, as you just hold him off by hucking tridents in its mouth. To be fair, I got no clue how you'd even attempt to do boss fights in this game outside of fistfights, but even with that handicap, they still miss some opportunities. They never do what the movies do, where Indy wins a fight by outsmarting his opponent when he's clearly outmatched, like the guy with the plane propeller or the dude with the sword he just blasts away. The game runs technically smooth too, and actively highlights the gameplay. It's that immersion I keep coming back to that's accentuated by the slower movement, great sound effects, and haptic feedback as you trudge through high water. This game just looks so fantastic, especially when roaming the open world and seeing the beautiful sights they have to offer. It genuinely has some of the most unique and mesmerizing environments I've ever seen. And it's great to see an HD Dr. Octopus, since the last time we saw him in a video game was before HD was even a thing. The only time the technical performance doesn't make the game better is when it actively drags it down. This game is super impressive most of the time, but the times it's not impressive, it's so rough. It just gets a little too big for its britches at times. Like, the hair can almost be too simulated, same with the clothes. There's some graphical pop-ins when you start the game up. The way these two fall in this scene is... yeah, and the rendering or complete lack thereof can be shocking. The worst cases though were in the side content, when the game would literally not let me progress, or when it froze and I had to restart the game when I was chasing collectibles after I finished the story. The side content is really great though. The only time it's not is the same as the technical performance, and that's when it gets in its own way. This game has my favorite kind of side content, where it's practically part of the main story. Getting double-crossed by an old student hunting one of the stones for Voss is so much fun. Reflecting light beams as you and Gina unlock a golden mask that could lead to the location of the stone in Giza. Finding artifacts and saving informants from the black shirts who have information relating to the Great Circle is really cool. I found the scorpions that come back in the main story in the side content first. It's so good. The Vatican sucks. There's a reason they don't stay in Venice long in Crusade, and it's because it's just a city. Yeah, it's beautiful, but we've seen it before every day. The fun happens in the adventure underneath the city, in the catacombs. There's no adventure to be felt walking around the Vatican, especially when one of those side quests involves backtracking across the map over and over again. It's so lame walking around a city dressed as a priest cracking safes so I can deliver a book to an old nun. I feel like it should have been a small section you go through like the Himalayas or Shanghai, just longer. It's why Giza and Sukhothai feel monumental. Not only do you see traps set off and arms crushed in the side content, but how often in real life are you roaming the desert or boating through the jungle? It's like there's two ways to make an Indiana Jones game. You can make a playable Indiana Jones movie, or you could create a video game and put an Indiana Jones skin on it. And it's when it chooses to be the latter that it suffers the most, but it's the former where the side content really shines. Not only does it fit in with the story, but it builds on the character of Indiana Jones. I don't know how I feel about him being an archaeological legend to the point that one of the other archaeologists thinks he doesn't exist, as he doesn't really do it for the fame, but his reaction to it is in line with the character. This game understands what makes Indiana Jones so iconic and fun.
Please, come to confess me.
Hurry, let's get this over with.
Father, forgive me because I've sinned. I had an affair with my mother-in-law and...
It's all right. Just say 3 Hail Marys.
No, Father, you don't understand. I fear that my mother-in-law is with the child also.
Jesus Christ, what have you done?
Wait. You are not a priest.
Screw it. Sorry, pal, but you kind of deserved it.
But more importantly, they understand Indiana Jones the character. Troy Baker did such a good job with Indy, especially with the voice, that I completely forgot it was him. I was so captured by his performance and the excellent writing that I forgot that this isn't the real Harrison Ford. From little things like him using the terminology of the time, calling his record for Antonio a humdinger, to the callback to his dad shooting the back rudder of the plane, they just get it. I especially love how at times he just can't be bothered. Like when he knows there's always a way to trigger the safety mechanism on a trap, but he can't figure out how and just says screw it and sets it off anyway. He really shines too in his area of expertise, when he's making discoveries with Nawal or getting into it with Voss trying to out-archaeologist each other. Speaking of, Voss is crazy. First of all, name is Emmerich, round glasses, welcome back, Otacon. Second, this dude's insanely evil and super fun to watch. Honestly, he's kind of a mix of Belloc and Tote from Raiders, but seeing his mind games at work, manipulating Gantz and intimidating Ventura is super interesting. My one genuine problem with the characters has to do with one of his sidekicks, Bergman, and it's that he was set up with no resolution. He's built as this stoic, intimidating enemy, wearing old school facial cosmetics that were used by scarred soldiers in World War I. I was expecting some big, high evolutionary reveal where you punch his mask off during his fight and see how scarred he is. He doesn't have a fight. He is just there to stop Gina from helping you in the final battle. And while we're on the topic, I am going to say something that may be controversial. Ginetta Lombardi is the best partner Indiana Jones has ever had. I like her more than Willie, I like her more than Elsa, more than Henry, more than Marion. I like her more than Short Round. And that's no disrespect to any of them. It's just everything about her is just that good. From the way they meet, both in disguise and figuring each other out, to the way their stories intertwine, their built-up relationship, the fact she'll give him shit right back.
I've had a run-in with the Nazis before, and trust me, it ain't a walk in the park.
Okay, then. Let's see if you can keep up.
Fine. What do you mean if I can keep up?
She's one of my favorite video game characters ever. I was crushed when her sister, a character with 0 minutes of screen time alive, was found dead on the German boat, not only because I wanted to meet her, but because Gina's actress is fantastic at her job. She's just as adventurous and dedicated to her work as he is, which is why they gel together so well, and why it hurts so much but makes so much sense when she has to leave. It's way more interesting to have a character that's on his level. He's so used to saving the women on his adventures with him and cares about her so much that he wants to save her at the end, and she says no.
I don't need to be saved.
We gotta get out of here.
We can't just leave now. We have to go after Voss.
I can't lose you.
Come on. Don't you want to know what this is all about?
You're damn right I do.
And let's talk about that. Let's get into what this has all been about. What's going on with the Great Circle? Because I thought it was gonna be a real life coincidence that the writers jumped on, and since there was no substance to a coincidence, the story would be lame. It kinda did. From what I can tell from reading a Reddit post I found after 5 seconds of Googling, the Great Circle as a concept of monuments lining up in a circle is kinda sort of a thing, but that's not what I mean. I mean that the story kinda sucked for a bit. It started out of nowhere. Tony Todd steals a little cat mummy and you run off following him. That's it. And once you're there, it took a while to really get into it, because even though it is, this doesn't seem like a game where you can go back to an area after you've already left it, and since the side stuff ties in the main content super well, I didn't want to miss anything. So the start wasn't very impactful, and it took a while for me to get into the action. But once Benito Mussolini is on screen, yeah, it picks up. You find out there was a rock in the mummy, and you learn about the Great Circle, a bunch of spiritually significant monuments all lining up in a perfect circle, and each one supposedly has a powerful stone. Okay, so we got a villain, a giant, and a treasure hunt. Well, it turns out that Tony Todd, the giant, is one of many that's part of an order who are all actually Nephilim, like from the Bible. Not only that, but one of them has these tattoos of an ancient language on him, similar to modern languages, but too old to be any, and it's revealed to be Adamic, as in Adam, as in Adam and Eve, as in the Hebrew word for man, the first language of humans before the Tower of Babel. Okay, it's really picking up. So you go around deciphering the Adamic language. And they do that thing in Indiana Jones that I love, where you hunt down an artifact, go through the trials and traps, and just when you get your hands on it, the villain swoops in and takes it from you. Then you do the same to them in the Himalayas on a boat that should be on the other side of the world. Turns out it got there because the power of the stones lets you teleport. Huh. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that really took the wind out of my sails. Now, to be fair, I immediately stopped caring because it was followed by a fantastic action sequence, fighting through Shanghai as it's become a battlefield, getting a Club Obi-Wan cameo, but I still wasn't wild about this. And that's when Indiana Jones and the Great Circle did my favorite thing a story can do that I haven't seen since I played Sons of Liberty, and that's take every problem I have with it and fix it retroactively all in the same story. The cat mummy, the sudden start, the teleporting, all of that is fixed when you find Noah's Ark. Dude! Not only does this further the Indiana Jones motif of blatantly confirming a religion and how whenever something related to Christianity is involved, so are the Nazis, but it's so out of left field and it took me completely by surprise and still made sense. The stones, when all aligned together on the Ark, can teleport to anywhere. They were a gift from God to Noah to use to gather the animals before the flood and repopulate the earth after. At each place around the earth after the flood, the stones were left there, and after being worshipped as idols for their power, monuments were made, forming the Great Circle. Then the Nephilim aligned themselves with the Vatican, forming a secret order to try and get the stones back, one of which being the cat mummy. It all ties in and wraps up beautifully. Not only does it make sense in and of itself, but I love the little details they add, like how in the Bible, God flooded the earth because of how wicked the people were, and it was the judgment that killed Voss. He wanted to abuse a gift from God, and for that he was punished, not only with a flood, but with another horrifying Indiana Jones villain death. And it's when Locust tries to save everyone and cherish the gift that the storm calms and the stones work. Not only that, but it would make sense that the Nephilim would be alive unless they were completely and wholly wiped out. And the choice to add them in is perfect. The group of people that are first mentioned in the Bible in the same chapter that God instructs Noah. The story is so respectful of the scripture it's based on, just like Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, and unlike Temple of Doom, one of my very few problems with that movie. They don't really change anything, only make assumptions, create historical fiction based off of it. They even find the Ark in Iran, which borders the mountain range where it says the Ark landed. And I especially love what the story creates outside of the story itself. Like the image of Nazi flags so ignorantly claiming something that confirms the beliefs of the people they oppressed, which later is what gets them killed. Getting killed by something that they foolishly believe they can own that's an icon of the religion of the people they unjustly hate. Their ignorance and disrespect of something cherished by the people they oppressed is their downfall, the same way they're killed by the Ark of the Covenant, the same way Donovan is killed by the Holy Grail. There are a couple issues. God promised he'd never destroy the earth again, which this kind of contradicts if you interpret that as never flooding again. But to be fair, you could say that was Voss's doing. The Nephilim actually would have all been completely wiped out by the flood unless they were recreated again afterwards, so the historical fiction isn't bulletproof, and I don't understand why Locust is trying to stop Indy. I understand protecting the stones from people like Voss, but he seems to stop Indy because, as he says, knowledge is a curse. How? Dude, just tell him not to use them. He's not going to anyway. Nothing about Indiana's life has changed after knowing what the stones do and what to say to activate them. But that frankly feels like a nitpick. Complaining about a few lines of dialogue in a 10 to 15 hour story that has proved itself to be a worthy addition to the Indiana Jones franchise. This is one of the coolest games I've ever played. Practically every single plot issue I had with it was smoothed over by that fantastic ending, and most of the gameplay and technical issues are simply outdone by how immersive and fun this game is to play. This is one of those games like Star Wars Jedi Survivor where how I feel about it is different to what I think its quality is. I said with Jedi Survivor that it's probably objectively a 5.5 out of 10, but I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10 because with my biases and love for Star Wars since I was a kid, a 7 is my score. That's what separates different reviewers, learning their personal biases, learning what they like and don't like, so that you can compare that against your own biases and get an idea of how you might feel about the game. So I think objectively, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is probably an 8.5 or a 9, but I want to be fair and give it the same bump I gave Jedi Survivor based on my biases, so I'm gonna give it a 9.5 out of 10, but that is a very high 9.5. As I'm writing, recording, and editing this, I'm constantly flip-flopping between a 9.5 and 10, but I think the main point of contention for me is just how much of a roadblock the section in the Vatican City was. But I absolutely can say that I think this is probably the best video game entry in an existing franchise. Not a franchise tie-in game like the Monsters Inc. or Revenge of the Sith video games, but a new entry into existing canon, like the Star Wars Jedi games or RoboCop Rogue City. And I hear the fanboys already. Carter, are you dumb? What about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic? And you know what? I'll listen to you. You're hearing it first here. I, Carter McSwaggins, will try Knights of the Old Republic. When it never comes out.